Hey everyone, Alexander here for 30 Days of Symphony. Well, Brahms won. What a ride. Brahms finally in 1876, at the ripe old age of 43, brings his first symphony to the musical world, and it is an absolute triumph. Then, as happens so often in so many ways of life, fortified by this success, the second symphony is written 1 year later. It follows in quick succession. Brahms is now riding high in the confidence of middle age. Whereas the first symphony in 1876 was premiered in Karlsruhe and Mannheim. Now for the symphony number 2, we're going to play with the big boys. The world premiere is with no less than the Vienna Philharmonic, and then Brahms himself conducts the second performance with the great Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra, the second great orchestra of Germany in that mid to late 19th century. Well, Brahms is his easygoing self-assurance, not arrogance, not at all, but a sense of inner calm is everywhere to be found in his Symphony Number 2, again shadowing Beethoven in the same key signature as Beethoven's Second Symphony, the bright and lovely key of D major. That being said, Brahms's Second Symphony is in some ways the Beethoven's Second Symphony, but it's also mirroring the Symphony Number 6 by Beethoven, his Pastoral Symphony, because Brahms 2 is the complete result of a wonderful kind of endless summer of a holiday he had in the mountainous lake country of Austria. And he wrote his friends about, I'm having such a wonderful time. I'm renting 2 little rooms in an old castle, and I go for long walks along the lake every day, and my spirit has been completely restored. And out of that, again, that kind of sense of self-awareness and self-assurance comes this Second Symphony. Very much a pastoral symphony. Not just in the pastoral mood of Brahms's 4 symphonies, this is unquestionably the most lyrical of the 4. If the first symphony is all, there's a wonderful German phrase called Sturm und Drang, storm and stress, all of anguish and struggle, ultimately brilliantly resolved at the end of that Symphony Number 1. The Second Symphony, again, is like this calm of the assurance of early middle age. However, it's not just this calm, serene, lyrical mood that makes the link with Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony. It's also, again, Brahms, as I said yesterday, Brahms, the progressive conservative, Brahms, the innovative traditionalist, working within that tradition established by Beethoven. Actually, Beethoven gets it from his teacher, Franz Joseph Haydn, in what we called his kind of monothematic symphonies, where you base an entire movement on one thematic idea. Brahms takes his cue from Beethoven, who you'll remember when we were talking about the Beethoven Pastoral, that first movement is built on that one little tiny idea that dun 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 dee da da dun 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 da 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 da, and the whole movement. You don't notice it because, again, it's like this Zen-like state. You're just so blissed out over it. But again, he builds an entire symphony first movement on one little idea. Brahms takes that tradition established by Beethoven, inherited from his teacher Haydn, and goes one step further. He builds an entire symphony, an entire 4-movement symphony on one little idea. And in the case of Brahms 2, it's this 4-note cell. It's like you're in biology class. It's like you're looking under a microscope. It's this little 4-note cell, which consists of 2 of the basic building blocks of Western music: the semitone, the half step, and the fifth, the tonic to the dominant, as we say. It's just this little idea in D major, D, C sharp, D, A. No melody, not a melody, but just a kind of a figure, an idea. From that little tiny cell grows this glorious creature, this beautiful organism of the entire Second Symphony. Early on, Brahms was wildly unpopular in that most, outgoingly intellectual of American cities, Boston. And there was even a joke at Symphony Hall in Boston. Someone put a sign over the door, over one of the exits, saying, quote, "This way for Brahms," because those great Bostonians thought that Brahms was way too cerebral. And the Second Symphony was their ultimate case in point, because they said there was no melody. But my goodness, the second subject of the first movement, that lullaby, which is again a very close cousin of the Brahms lullaby that some of us, including me, my mother used to sing to me while I was trying to go to sleep as a little boy. That is one of Brahms's greatest melodies of all time, and I'll let you discover it in about 10 minutes. But even there, it's built on this little four-note cell. The second movement is kind of a break from this outward technique of, as I said yesterday, as Arnold Schoenberg in 1920s Vienna would later comment, this technique of developing variation where you're constantly developing the same ideas. But here it's different, but it's ultimately the same. The second movement, with this endless melodic line spun out by the cellos. The second movement on the surface is in the most simple of musical forms. It's just A-B-A form. There's a A section, then there's a contrasting B section, then the A section comes back. But again, you don't notice that because you're so mesmerized by this incredible spider's web of melody. Because again, the moment Brahms presents a theme to us, he starts developing. He starts developing that theme, developing that little mustard seed of notes, if you will. The Scherzo, again, this is no Beethoven Scherzo, but it's like the first symphony. It's funny, Brahms in his Scherzo movements, his third movements of his symphonies, refuses to write a scherzo in the manner of Beethoven, like a dance, like a dance in triple, where the meter, the pulse is in one, but it's it's three. He refuses to do that. He's just not going to play Beethoven's game. Because, of course, he did that. He gave us three-quarter time dances throughout his career. Think of all those beautiful waltzes he wrote for the piano, the Liebeslieder waltzes, the love song waltzes that he wrote for chorus and two pianos. And, of course, the crowning glory of his dance music, his set of Hungarian dances for piano duet that then got instantly orchestrated by several composers, including his good friend Dvorak, because they became instantly popular. My friends, Brahms became one of the wealthiest composers in Europe because of the success of his dances. In his symphonies, he wants the song, but he doesn't want the dance. So instead of a three-quarter time scherzo, he writes again another kind of country dance, something again you would have heard at like a country inn on the outskirts of Vienna, a little town in Central Europe on a summer afternoon with a glass of the new wine. This is in three-quarter time, but it's no waltz and it's certainly no scherzo. It's what the Austrians call a Ländler, which was the forerunner to the waltz. It's this don don da di don don da, very relaxed, gemütlich, as the Germans would say, just laid back and very charming. But even here, he is developing that half-step idea. Remember the opening, di da da da. If you reverse it to da di da da da, you get that don don da di don da, that Ländler idea in the oboe. The finale, and this is kind of unbelievable, the finale, the last of the symphony's four movements, by far the most heroic of the symphony's movements and its general mood, especially in its crowning glory of a climax near the end, it's so easy to not notice that the main idea, again, from which everything develops, is that dee da da da, this dee da 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 da. It's that, again, that semitone tonic dominant thing. It's the same melodic cell, but developed into something completely and totally different. Instead of this pastoral, open-hearted lyricism, we have the heroism of, again, that Beethoven of the Second Symphony. Brahms's manner of innovating, of constantly innovating, of being a progressive within this great Germanic tradition is something that never ceases to amaze me. You know, there are many great composers from the 19th century whose symphonies are the foundation of our repertoire as orchestras. Some of them, they'll remain nameless, but you say, oh, not another blankety blank, you know. But with Brahms, you never get bored. You never get sated. The challenge is always there, which is why the challenge for performers of Brahms, whether it's any orchestra of any ability in the world, never gets boring. And similarly, as those of us, myself included, who are listeners to the Brahms symphonies, the music never gets stale. There's always something to discover, always a moment of surprise. So for the Second Symphony in performance, we now go to another of the great archival live performances. This by the Vienna Philharmonic, the orchestra that gave the world premiere of the Brahms Symphony No. 2, with a conductor who, like Leonard Bernstein, was one of the great eccentric genius conductors of the late 20th century. This is the great German conductor Carlos Kleiber with the Vienna Philharmonic Brahms Symphony No. 2.